Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and on this channel over the past, it feels like maybe even a year or so, I've given credit where credit is due to Ana in particular for coming out on the right side of the criminal justice issue. Now, it is informed by personal experience, but the fact of the matter is Ana is pushing back against the left wing from somebody who is in a left wing position, and she's often using really solid data in order to do so. Now, at the same time, Cenk Ana has been coming along as well, although I've given him less credit because he seems to give more caveats and all this other stuff while he's doing it. However, in this video, I actually saw Cenk Ana reference some data and some information that I presented to you multiple times on this channel, and I've seen virtually no one else talk about in the mainstream press, on online right-wing media, or anywhere, and that is something that I think is worthy of acknowledgement. And of course, the video that I'm talking about from the Young Turks has about 16,000 views at the time of me recording this video, so this great nugget, this great bit of information in this video is getting almost no attention. So that's what I want to talk about and highlight today. But before I do, thank you to everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
And yes, on April 27th of this year, I will be at the Vulcan Gas Company. It's a theater in Austin for Mindsfest. Tickets in the description of this video.
Washington Post published a bit of a scatterbrained piece on retail theft in America. And I thought it was worth talking about because there was one excerpt in particular that's getting a lot of negative attention. But I wanted to do a more broader discussion on the topic of retail theft and why it is that there seems to be two different narratives playing out in the country, with some arguing that this is completely made up, it's not really taking place, and others arguing, no, this is definitely a problem, and that's the reason why certain stores are locking up their merchandise or stores are shutting down entirely due to the shoplifting and the retail theft that they're experiencing.
So the framing of this particular video revolves around this Washington Post op-ed where somebody seems to be going back and forth on the issue of retail theft, and one of the worst lines in the entire piece is this line about how, oh, the reason there's retail theft is because we have a culture of theft in the United States of America, because the United States of America is stolen land.
In my opinion, the dumbest excerpt was what I'm about to read you. America is a sticky-fingered nation built on stolen land, and its current moral panic is about shoplifting.
Now, Ana dismisses this with the extreme prejudice that it deserves, and so does Cenk Ana.
I get that she's trying to make a point about the founding of this country and what happened to Native Americans. Can we just focus at the topic at hand and just be evidence-based in how we're relaying the information to people?
So,
are you justifying the crimes because this is stolen land? And if you are, why do people who currently live today and had nothing to do with what happened to Native Americans have to suffer the consequences of what happened many generations ago?
But I just want to point out that these people live among us, these people who think that you could just justify anything based on some random thing that they could pull up from the history, and this is insane and absurd and ridiculous in every possible way. Every place on planet Earth, I got news for you guys, is conquered land. It's taken over, and to the victors go the spoils. So this idea that you can't have any restrictions on theft or anything like that because the natives apparently got cheated throughout American history is just asinine. There's no words for how dumb this argument is from this lady. And again, the idea that people are looting all these stores in retribution for the natives, again, where does this thought process even come from?
If you made a cultural point about guns, okay, yeah, there's some logic to that. And you could see that clearly, that America is obsessed with guns and has been historically. But people don't go around going like, hey, America's pro-theft, so everybody teach your kids to be thieves. That's not a thing that happens, and culture is passed down through the generations. So it's just a totally ridiculous point. And if you're trying to defend the idea that there isn't that much crime, number one, you should look at stats and facts, which we're about to show you. Number two, you should try to make sensible points.
So Cenk, of course, has to talk about guns randomly, and while I am going to praise him by the end of this video, I just want to point out that this is a common tactic, not just among Cenk Uygur, although he's especially guilty of this, but of many on the left wing, which is whenever you're talking about something that is meant to criticize people on the left, you always got to bring up something related to the right, no matter how unrelated it is to the topic at hand. So yeah, the idea that, yes, we have a Second Amendment culture, so America has a gun culture, therefore this is the similar thing to the claim about the natives and theft and how now you could steal from CVS. It makes no sense, Cenk. Just get to the point, all right? Get to the chopper.
And I think that she brought up the political thing as a way of saying, like, signaling to people, remember, it's the Republicans who are saying that crime is a problem. So if you're a good Democrat, you have to pretend that crime is not a problem. I don't think that helps the Democratic Party at all. I think that really, really hurts the Democratic Party to say to people, you know how as a society we told African Americans for hundreds of years, when they would say, hey, the cops are abusing us, we would say, we don't believe you. Right? Society at large said that.
Now then, Cenk, for some ungodly reason, talks about racism against black people. And to me, I feel like this is like a psychological thing. We're talking about criminality. Black people commit disproportionate crime. So Cenk has to run defense for black Americans. Again, really weird how these people work. But Ana cuts to the heart of the issue of this kind of left-wing denialism. And she actually gives an example that we referenced on this channel, which was Ocasio-Cortez denying the migrant crisis even exists.
Look, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but the gaslighting that I'm noticing by Democratic politicians on certain issues, and I think it's because they would rather be in denial than to address these difficult issues. These are difficult issues. So I think a good example is honestly the interview that AOC did on MSNBC recently, where they're discussing the migrant crisis. Guys, the migrant crisis is real. Like, you see it, it's impacting blue cities now. You have these Democratic strongholds with the people living in those communities now speaking out, and they're enraged about the situation because they don't have the resources to deal with the migrant crisis adequately, right? Then you have AOC go on MSNBC and say, there is no migrant crisis, this is just a right-wing narrative.
Now, the reason I'm showing you this particular clip is because I think it's important for us to function as a nation, for us to actually be able to agree, at least in broad strokes, on what the problems in our nation actually are. Because if we can agree that there is a problem, we can argue about the solutions. But if you have one side, and by the way, depending on the issue, it could be either side, in full denial of the fact that the issue even exists, you can never go forward because you're stuck at level zero. And Ocasio-Cortez with immigration is a perfect example of this. And this, by the way, is actually a very comparable example to the issue of crime. On top of that, Ocasio-Cortez was giving speeches about how we're desperate for resources for the migrants, specifically in the city of New York. So for her to turn around and go into full denial mode, to me, ridiculous and absurd. So it's a great example for a number of reasons. Credit where credit is due to Ana. But I want to get to the heart of this particular video, why I'm showing this to you in the first place, because it ends up leading to a great discussion on crime statistics. And I think there's one thing missing from it that I'd like to add and incorporate into it so that we can actually get this information out there.
So she writes that some shoplifters view it as a form of anti-capitalist social activism. But as activism, it's rather ineffective, more likely to harm a store's lower paid workers than the chain's chief executive, Karen Lynch, who was paid $21.3 million in 2022, according to CVS regulatory filings. And by the way, she's totally right about that. In fact, an expert that she cited in the piece said, quote, when you're stealing from that store, you are in fact stealing from those employees in a sense, because it does impact their livelihood.
So this is actually 100% true, by the way. The people who are being affected by these retail theft closures, eventually these multinational corporations are going to feel a portion of the impact if it keeps happening, keeps going unaddressed. And then we're moving to online retail when their business is set up for in-person retail, is the workers, the people at these stores. When there's a closure, they're the ones who get fired. And we hear reports about how these companies are going to try to transfer these individuals and all that. But let's be honest, the reason you have X amount of employees in one CVS and X amount of employees in another CVS is not because you're operating at half staff in CVS 1. So when number 2 closes, is you can move those people over there without any issue at all whatsoever. The net effect of this is going to be less people working at places like CVS, at Target, and all of that. On top of that, it's just sucky to go into all these stores and half the stuff is behind the glass or behind that plastic or whatever, and you have to call a clerk each and every time in order to get it because people keep stealing and there's less consequences for that stealing.
Then in other parts of the piece, she kind of minimizes the severity of the issue, writing that theft has gotten worse in some cities but better in others. That part's true. It's either underreported or over-exaggerated depending on whether you're asking a corporation or a bureaucracy. Anecdotes and vibes have filled in the gaps. No, but it's not just vibes that have filled in the gaps. It depends on who you're talking to, and if they're coming from a certain part of the country or certain cities in the country, it's very likely that their concerns are well-founded in the statistics and the facts.
Look, Anna's 100% right about this. The idea that you're going to dismiss and hand wave that this is all related to vibes and whatnot and not backed up by the data, especially when it comes to retail theft, is ridiculous and absurd. And what these people often cite is this supposedly, as they sell it, nationwide survey of cities that shows that retail theft is actually down 7%. Now, we've gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, and one of the things that we found out is that even with the limited number of cities that they selected, they had to arbitrarily remove New York City in order to make the number down rather than up, because with New York City alone, shoplifting, even with their selection of cities, was dramatically up. But more importantly, look at their selection of cities. Look at what cities happen to be missing from this. There's no Oakland, there's no Philadelphia. There's a bunch of places missing from here that we discuss all the time on this channel, and a bunch of places that don't seem to have any purpose to be here, like St. Petersburg, Florida, and all these other places that are obviously dragging down the number. There's not really an explanation for why X city was excluded and why X city was included. To me, this makes no sense, and the idea that this is somehow a representative sample of the entire nation as a whole is absurd on its face. And again, if it was that, why do they need to arbitrarily pull out New York City just to get the crime down number in comparison to before the Black Lives Matter riots?
According to a retail theft expert and criminal justice professor, his name is Karl Langhorst, he says that crimes aren't always reported to authorities, and that has led to huge flaws in the statistics that we're seeing. So in many cases, law enforcement doesn't respond because they don't have the resources to do so. Retail theft expert Karl Langhorst says some jurisdictions don't make it easy for retailers to file reports online too. So now the perception becomes, from a retailer's perspective, why waste my time reporting if nothing is going to get done about it? And he is correct about that. So the Marshall Project even did a pretty good report on this in late 2023, and they found that half of all crimes, both property crimes and nonviolent crimes, never get reported to authorities. And to understand why that's the case, you have to look into how the Justice Department collects its crime stats. And so there's two main ways they do so. One way is through the FBI's crime reporting program. The second way, and the crime reporting program is basically collecting data from local police departments in order to come up with, the crime statistics that they then share in a year-end report. The problem is that information is devastatingly incomplete because a lot of local police departments do not share their data with the FBI as it's compiling its report.
So right here, Ana Cenk talks about how we collect crime data, and this is incredibly important, and this is why I'm highlighting this entire video. And she highlights how historically or traditionally, we have two different methods of gathering this data. And there's a reason I'm giving those qualifiers, which I will address a little bit later. One is the Uniform Crime Report, which is the FBI attempting to gather information from law enforcement agencies in order to compile a list of reported crimes so that we can get that data. And the second happens to be the National Crime Victimization Survey, which is the gold standard in terms of criminal justice related surveys. I believe they interview people in 140,000 households and or send them surveys. It is meant to capture the unreported crimes and compare it to the reported crimes. And we tend to use the victimization survey, which comes out far later than the Uniform Crime Report, as a check on the Uniform Crime Report. And typically, historically, these two things are aligned. find. And by the way, the one thing that we don't get from the National Crime Victimization Survey is homicide statistics, because people who are the victim of homicide don't tend to fill out surveys very well for some reason. Maybe they're just lazy, maybe they've just gone limp and they just can't seem to do it.
The second way, though, is through the Bureau of Justice Statistics Crime Victimization Survey. So while the FBI tries to collect crime data directly from more than 18,000 police agencies through its Uniform Crime Reporting Program, the National Crime Victimization Survey interviews 150,000 families across the country. So the NCVS asks questions that capture crimes that were not reported to police as well as ones that were. So it's more comprehensive data that you should be focusing on to get a more holistic picture of what's happening. So the Justice Department's Crime Victimization Survey shows millions of violent and property crimes were never reported to the police, often because the victim reported the incident to another authority, like a school official, or because they don't think the police would take the matter seriously. Some crimes that are reported to the police never end up in the police report and would not be counted by the FBI's crime statistics.
Now look, while Ana is not saying anything wrong per se, like at all whatsoever, everything that she said would be a completely accurate and factual breakdown of how we gather crime statistics nationally up until the year 2022. And Cenk is gonna bring something up, and then I'm going to explain to you why I think this Young Turks video, which of course doesn't get the views that it deserves, is incredibly important, because if this information starts to get out there, then maybe we can get some answers on a question that I've been bringing up on this channel for a very long time.
This is part of the reason why there's a disconnect. Not all cities are impacted by this equally, and there's also a problem in how the crime statistics are reported, or a problem in what news agencies decide to focus on when it comes to the statistics.
Yes, so let me give you some last set of amazing facts from me. I think that the phenomena that Anna's talking about is really amazing, because they explain that the disparity between reported crimes and actual crimes was never higher than in between 2021 and 2022. So that means people have stopped reporting crimes at record rates. And so the reason why is obvious. They're frustrated that the cops never come. If they do come, they let the guys off immediately. And the cops say, hey, it's not us, it's the prosecutors. And the answer is, it's probably a little bit of both. And so to give you a sense of how much crime is not reported, only 41% of violent crimes are reported. So the majority of violent crimes are never even reported. Okay, so that's where we are today.
Listen, credit where credit is due. I was just making fun of Cenk not too long ago for his coverage of the Kansas City shooting thing and how he was denying what people were talking about related to shielding the identity. But the only other person on this entire platform that I've heard bring this particular issue up has been Cenk Uygur. Nobody has done it so far. It's 100% true. Let's go into the numbers. So when you look at the comparison between the Uniform Crime Report and the National Crime Victimization Survey, what you will find out is that according to the UCR, total violent crime went down by 2% in the years covered. However, according to the National Crime Victimization Survey, it's up 75%. For rape, it went down according to the UCR by 6%, but was up 58% by the National Crime Victimization Survey. Robbery up 1%, just 1% according to the UCR, but up 47% according to the National Crime Victimization Survey. And aggravated assault down 2% according to the UCR, but up 104% according to the National Crime Victimization Survey. Now again, Cenk is 100% right. The same article that I'm sure Cenk is sourcing from this says that the Uniform Crime Report and the NCVS rarely differed by as much as they did in the year that we're talking about. And according to the NCVS data on both reported and unreported crimes, 52% of serious violent crimes were reported in 2021, and that dropped to 48% in 2022, a relative decrease of nearly 8%. The decline in reporting crime to police was particularly large for aggravated assault, falling from 61% to 50%, a decrease relatively of 18%. Now, this article cites the fact that people don't think the police are going to do anything, defund the police efforts, and other things as possible explanations. However, there's also something else that needs to be addressed, and this is where I'm going to go back to that part where Ana described everything basically correct up until the year 2022-2023, and here's why. So for most of the history of the Uniform Crime Report in this nation, what we used to gather the information from law enforcement was this database called the SRS database. Now that's the summary reporting system. So most of the Uniform Crime Reports, almost all of them that you've seen throughout your entire life, come from that. That's how the FBI gathers that information. But you can see in 2022, they actually have the summary reporting system and the National Incident-Based Reporting System. This is a new system, a new method of gathering data and information that the FBI is using in order to put together their uniform crime reports. Completely different method. It's still meant to capture law enforcement data, but we've been transitioning to that over time. And as you can see, you're losing a lot of law enforcement agencies in the process. In 2022, you had 15,726 of 18,888 law enforcement agencies reporting under these combined methods. Now, when you get to 2023, what you find out is that nearly 16,000 agencies reporting drops to 14,000 of 19,018 law enforcement agencies. But more importantly, when you look at the source data for this, it only comes from the National Incident-Based Reporting System, which means the SRS, for all intents and purposes, is done for. Now, why is this significant, you should be asking yourself? Well, the reason for that should be perfectly obvious to everyone out there in the audience. Because in 2023, if you haven't heard the latest messaging from the left wing, crime went down dramatically. In fact, according to some reports, it's as low as it's been in 50 years. But what they don't tell you, the asterisk to that, is that by this new metric that we completely pivoted to in the year 2023, that is different from how we measured crime throughout the whole history of the Uniform Crime Report, crime is down dramatically. And there have been no efforts so far to try to normalize the differences between the National Incident-Based Reporting System to the SRS in order to figure out if we're actually seeing such a dramatic crime drop or if this is just a difference in data collection method. Now, I'm not saying that this is 100% the case, because you do have individual law enforcement agencies that do their own crime reporting, and they have seen drops in certain categories depending on the region, and a lot of times those local agencies are pretty damn reliable in their data collection methods. Like the LAPD and the NYPD are some of the most data-driven police departments on planet Earth. So even if they're not participating in the National Incident Reporting System, which by the way, they're not, the fact of the matter is we can look at those individual cities and determine whether or not their crime fell or rose individually, even if they're not incorporated in the national numbers. But there's a whole host of departments that did not decide to participate in this new system, which is voluntary, by the way, and it's more so than the previous year. And in the previous year, just incorporating the National Incident-Based Reporting System seems to have created a dramatic divide between the Uniform Crime Report and the victimization survey. Now, maybe time will tell, maybe we will get information on this, but to me, when you change your statistical collection method and then you get a dramatic difference in the statistics, that should be a red flag for at least concern. So yeah, while Ana and Cenk are 100% on the right track with this particular video, there's actually an additional layer that should cast some level of doubt, or at least, again, warrant more investigation with these Uniform Crime Report numbers that, again, the left will often tell you in many other years aren't as reliable as the survey data, which, by the way, is in fact true. It is 100% accurate because the survey data covers unreported crimes as well, but then when it's convenient for them, they'll just throw that number out there without giving you any of the additional context, like less agencies reporting and a complete pivot to how the data is collected in the first place. So yeah, once again, I'm giving credit to Ana Kasparian, but on top of that, I gotta give credit to Cenk Uygur, who actually hit the nail on the head and brought up something that quite literally I felt like I was the only person pointing out over and over and over again on this channel, and I'm happy to see somebody else bring it up. Again, all the sources will be linked in the description. You can check it out for yourself. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, then show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about a pretty good Young Turks video that, of course, is not getting the views it deserves. Till next time.